on today's Story Beat.
I'll tell you, one of the things I used to do in my English literature classes when I was teaching for the University of Maryland, I'd take them out and for 10 minutes, I just said, all I want you to do, I'm going to go outside, is look up in the sky and look around. I want you to make mental notes of what you see, you hear, you smell, if anything. And then we come back into the room and then we talk about, well, what did we observe? What did we sense? What did we feel? Not just maybe with our own five senses, but inside our being, inside our soul, and then write it down. That was a good, takeoff to further writing exercises.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on Story Beat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Ron Roman, has written extensive travel, academic, and political articles for regional, national, and international publications. He studied both fiction and creative writing for his third graduate degree in Humanities from Wesleyan University. Ron has acted in numerous Korean TV dramas and motion pictures like Operation Chromite, portraying Admiral Forrest Sherman opposite Liam Neeson's General Douglas MacArthur. In 2025, Ron published his alternate history, apocalyptic doomsday thriller novel Of Ashes and Dust, which was a finalist for the Chanticleer International Book Award in the Global Thrillers category. I've read Of Ashes and Dust and can tell you it's a highly entertaining story that explores the anarchy of an apocalyptic future that includes revelations about UFOs and governmental conspiracies, all set against a crumbling society. If you enjoy reading about the potential societal challenges a deteriorating world may face, I highly recommend Ron's insight-filled book to you. Ron is also the recipient of the Poet magazine's Poet of the Month Award for his contributions. Also, check out his book, A Poetic Rhapsody of the Soul, which is published by Wintry Press, and it's being released in 2026. As an associate professor of English, English as a second language, and humanities, Ron taught at the University of Maryland Global Campus Asia. Ron resides in South Korea with his wife, where he works on U.S. military installations, assisting U.S. military retirees and dependents. So for all those reasons and many more, it's a great privilege for me to have the author Ron Roman as my guest on StoryBeat today. Ron, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve. Great to be here. It's talking live right outside the Osan Air Base, where I work part-time. It's really part-time, as an assistant retirees director for veterans, retirees and dependents. And
how do you help them? What do you do?
what I do is I help them. I help them bring them to hospitals and whatnot and stuff like that as a assistant, as I said, assistant retiree officer as director of the division here. And other than that, I'm really busy writing as much as I can as well.
I just want to thank you for your service. That's very kind of you.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I was in fact I was stationed here in Korea way back in the '70s, getting on in years a bit, And I'm a member of the local and an officer in the local VFW Post 8180 and Colonel Millet's post, and a lifetime member to VFW as well. And I write a lot about combat veterans and their inability to fit into civilian society. My short story is available for anybody who wants to read it. I'm going to register the copyright rather, later this week with the U.S. Office of Copyright, and it's called The Journey. You can get on my website. It's 8,200 words. It's 26 and a half pages, so it's not that short. It's called The Journey. It's about a veteran combat veteran who wakes up and he's in the middle of the forest and he doesn't know where the hell he is. I mean, he's got temporary or maybe even permanent amnesia. He doesn't know if he's alive, he's dead, he's reincarnated, and he struggles to find his way back into normalcy. It's called The Journey, and it's on my website, which is www.writerronroman.com. That's www.writerronroman.com.
So let's talk about your creative process. What were your earliest inspirations and influences? What writers did you begin to read when you were what, a young boy?
Yeah, yeah. I wasn't a good student, by the way, in high school. My parents always reminded me of that. Unlike my brother, who later on became a surgeon, he's older, he retired. He was National Merit Society scholar, as they used to call this. Is way to hell back in the '60s, and I thought at times I hated high school. I barely made it through, and but I remember in my senior year, I started getting interested. I had a natural talent, if you would, for English, more so certainly than chemistry, which I hated Mrs. Thomas's class over half a century now. And Somerset Maughams of Human Bondage, 1915. Wow, that's 111 years now. Was the first novel I think I ever read. Really captured me, and got me interested. And I went on to college initially as a just general major, not majoring in anything, in other words. And then I finally became an English major, and then started back in the '70s as an English teacher back in Connecticut, where I had my home. I still own a home out there, by the way, in Connecticut. And
What did you teach?
I taught English, and then not for very long. I lasted 3 days. I started Monday morning, and Wednesday afternoon. It was pouring like the Dickens, and this was in Bridgeport Central High School, and it was about 2:30 in the afternoon. School was out, and what happened was I was staring out the window and says, "Hey, I can't do this. I can't do this for the next 20, 30, 40 years. I got to go out and get me some more education, go back to graduate school, and become a professor, at least teach adults," which I did. Got 3 graduate degrees, and my latest one was at Wesleyan University, Middletown, Connecticut, and that's in humanities with a specialization in interdisciplinary writing. And then, when I started teaching U.S. military overseas, actually, I taught in Connecticut as well, but I started teaching. My niche was teaching U.S. military overseas in what is called the Indo-Pacific Command, and I taught all over the Indo-Pacific Command. I taught in Japan, North, Central, South, Okinawa, which is actually part of Japan. I taught in Diego Garcia, which is in the Indian Ocean. That's in the news now because that was just attacked by the Iranians with the 2 missiles. That's a U.S. British joint site on an atoll out there. And I taught in Korea, I taught in the Philippines, you name it, here and there. And retired in 2020 at the beginning and the intensification of the COVID-19 virus, because everything went online, and it was time for me to retire. And my college teaching career in English spanned over 4 decades. So I've been around the block a few times.
What kinds of stories do you most gravitate toward?
Doomsday thrillers. My book of Ashes and Dust is an apocalyptic doomsday thriller, like Stephen King. I think his Stand, right? Came out in 1973. Well, it's like 1,200 pages. My book is like about 265 instead, 88,500 words. And I would say if I had a single one writer, was the biggest influence for me, F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you right now, the book of Great Gatsby, which came out, by the way, in April of 1925. So it's been just over the centennial. It's coming up 101 years now. Was instrumental in me as in terms of emulating his style, which is poetically lyrical, or is that lyrically poetical? It reads like poetry at times, and it's bring tears to the eyes of a dead man.
So let's talk about your book of Ashes and Dust. Tell the listeners what Of Ashes and Dust is about.
At the time of the millennium, 3 people struggle for survival in a small New Hampshire town as the world spins into chaos, not realizing that each harbors secrets that will eventually pit them against one another. The story evolves from the U.S. government's earlier 2 classified secret projects during the Vietnam War, the United States Air Force's revelation about UFOs and Project 67. And by the way, this is actually true. 1973, U.S. Air Force Chief of Staff General Brown admitted that there was some strange flying saucer sightings, And originally they were thought to be the helicopters of the Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese, but they didn't have any helicopters. And that's so the story over here is actually embedded partially in a lot of truth. To continue. Striving to survive a global Armageddon with his Japanese teaching assistant paramour, Professor Will Watson, tortured Vietnam War hero and New Hampshire Liberty Militia's activist, hounded by the state police and the FBI, struggles to surmount haunting Vietnam War ghost and the impending collapse of a nation, a world caving in on them. Watson must face the truth about his friendship with classic homosexual and militia comrade Mark Mercati, who, while in the military himself, surreptitiously had Watson placed in a top-secret Vietnam War project, Project 67. Both Watson and Mercati struggle to adjust to civilian life. When Watson finally thinks he is settling down, he discovers something beyond his wildest fantasies. While Watson was in the Army, Mercati had the U.S. government secretly inject an implant inside his head to monitor him. When he finds out how and why, it forces him to question his own sanity. But Mercati is not the friend he pretends to be. Not all his conspiracies are theories, some are fact. The U.S. government appears to be collapsing, yet extraterrestrial forces are also monitoring events. Watson isn't a mild-mannered professor. He's a secret vigilante killer. His paramour, Kimiko Tanimoto, is pregnant with his child, but knows little of his true nature.
So what inspired you in the first place to write this?
Yeah, I guess, I've always by the way, the idea of UFOs and it's really tangential to the plot. That's more of a teaser, if anything, but I've always been interested in that. Well, ever since I was a kid in high school, my best friend in high school got me interested in, UFOs. This is way back when I graduated in the late 60s. And I used to listen at night to the, New York City Long John Nebel show. He was the dean of talk radio way back then, and practically when I was a college kid, and.
So what got you to want to write a book about the apocalypse now?
Well, hell, Steve, we live in dangerous times, and every time you turn on the computer these days lately, all we see are these stories were one step closer to World War III, and it just intrigued my being, if you will. And I wanted to, the more I dug into, the more interested I got, and I got to get this off my chest.
So are you a big UFO buff? Do you follow UFOs?
Yeah. I think I think this stuff is real. And like the David Garrosh, right? 3 years ago, was it? It's 2026, 2023. He appeared in Congress, and he was in the in the secret intelligence of the U.S. government saying this is all real. It's a government because a cover up because it's all being looked at from the government. The crash flying saucers and the debris. It's all being looked at the government and above top secret investigations because it's being looked at as a weapons research development point of view.
Mm-hmm. Are you concerned about our world devolving into an Armageddon-like world of chaos, like you described?
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy, but what's going on? Yeah, the short answer is yes.
So you live in South Korea. I've visited South Korea several years ago. How much do you think that the fact that you live not too far from the DMZ and both countries, North and South Korea, are threatening each other sort of on a regular basis? How much do you think that influenced what you wrote?
Yeah, not all that much, actually, because my interest in this long predates my even coming here to Korea. But yeah, and by the way, I own a home with my wife in Connecticut as well. I go back once a year for a full month. Yeah, I can see maybe because I'm overseas and I live most of my life as an adult overseas in different countries. I got a different perspective from other Americans who just live in the same neighborhood year in and year out, decade in and decade out. I've got a more like an international viewpoint about this. And
all right, so you're obviously spent a lot of time overseas, as you just said, and you have a home in Connecticut. Why did you set the book in New Hampshire?
Again, just because that's I'm most familiar with the New England setting, New England milieu, and the book starts off in in Fairfield County, which I got my second graduate degree at Fairfield University, and in an imaginary town, and very similar to actually Fairfield, Connecticut, that I grew up in. But the protagonist, the main character, the Professor Will Watson, he's a part-time professor there, and then he gets divorced in 1999 at the Millennium Eve, because remember the story takes place in Millennium Eve, 1999, and then he gets divorced, and he all he can get is part-time teaching jobs, which I went through myself a long time as well, and so it's semi-autobiographical to some degree in that respect, you know. And then he finally gets a tenure track position up in South Central or Central New Hampshire up there, this imaginary town called Springvale, and at this college over Ritzy College, and he gets a tenure track position, and he joins this militia because he likes the camaraderie of men, you know, and it reminds him of his military days, and he doesn't really quite fit in civilian life, you know. And then he meets this guy, as I said, this computer salesman by the name of Mark Mercati, and Mark is attracted to him sexually, and Will Watson is a little on the ditzy side. He doesn't quite realize this until the very end, you know. That's how they become buddies, but they have a really good friendship, or so he thinks. And Will Watson joins the Liberty Militia, and then the world is beginning to fall into chaos at the time in 1999, and then all hell breaks out when World War III actually breaks out. And I don't go into much detail into that in the book because he's hidden in a shelter with his girlfriend. Kimi Tanimoto, you see, and that's his teaching assistant at the college, and they have a romantic relationship, which is obviously against the regulation of the college. But the dean of the college looks the other way because the dean of the college knows that he wants to use Professor Will Watson to milk Ms. Tanimoto's father's money to make a big endowment pledge to the college.
So are any of these characters based on anyone you know? I know you said there's some semi-autobiographical stuff in there, but are the characters based on people you know?
Only the names. Only the names. Like, funny thing, I never said this publicly. Tanimoto is the name of a Japanese American soldier I was stationed at in Fort Hood, Texas. The last name, that's all. So that's about it, you know. And the Mercati was the name of this football player at Central Connecticut State University. I used to work out at the Plainville YMCA together, you know, with the last name. That's just the last names, that's all.
All right, so then how did you develop these characters? If they're not based on anyone you know other than the names, what did you do to develop the characters?
It just came to me because, I mean, it took a long time for me to write this book. It just came to me in terms of like epiphany, you know. That's the best word I can use to describe it.
Have you had an experience in your life where a friend that you had suddenly turned into something else that you weren't expecting, the way that Mark Mercati does?
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah. So you've had that kind of experience.
I used to work out at the Bridgeport Y when I was a graduate student. My first graduate degree at University of Bridgeport in Connecticut. I was a member of the Bridgeport Y for years. And one of the guys I used to work out with was about the sweetest guy you ever met, Steve. I tell you. He was a monster of a man. He was a real estate broker by day, and he was a professional hired assassin in mafia, one of the 5 New York City mafia families. He led a secret life, and when he was executed himself way back in the late 80s by a tit-for-tat mafia assassination, we heard about it all in the Connecticut newspapers' front stories. And one of the other guys in the gym was a member of the Connecticut State Police Intelligence Unit. And for the 3 years that I worked out of there, it was actually probably a little bit more, they never used to talk to each other. And then after this guy was executed, actually assassinated, he called. I was overseas at the time, teaching in the Philippines at the time. But my best buddy told me about it. He sent me all the newspaper clippings. We didn't have the internet at the time quite. It wasn't sophisticated, you know. So he sent me the newspaper clippings when back in the days when people actually used to read newspapers. And I found out that he called a meeting at the gym to tell the guys that, you always through the years you wondered why I never talked to so and so. Well, now you know, because what you read in the newspapers is all true. I know it hurts you to believe this about him. He was that kind of guy. We know that he was attributed with 19 killings. Killed 19 people. We believe that actually was 26. When we had him under investigation for 3 years, and that's why you realize that I never talked to him in public here in the gym, because he knew who I know, that he was under investigation by me.
So were elements of this person you knew, did he wind up a little bit in Mercati?
Exactly. Yeah. Come to think of it, yeah. That's it. I mean, it's been a while now since I fleshed out the characters in the story arc, but that's a good way of putting it.
So Watson seems a little bit cut off emotionally, a little bit. He seems a little indifferent about Kimiko's pregnancy. She gets pregnant, and he seems a little bit indifferent about it. Do you think his wartime experiences made him feel shut off or cut off from his emotions?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. He can't fit in the civilian society anymore, and neither can his buddy Mercati.
Can you tell us just a little bit, without giving too much away, about Project 67?
Yeah, that's it. It's to make a myrmidon or some super soldier. One who doesn't. That's an ancient Greek, I think, concept. One doesn't question authority, and he was going to be recommended for the Medal of Honor (MOH), but it had to be quashed by Secretary of Defense Melvin Laird, who was actually Secretary of Defense at the time in the Vietnam War, and he had to be quashed because we couldn't let this story out be made public about what happened to Mark Mercati. Having the U.S. government having the CIA secretly implanting this implant inside his head to monitor him.
And what does that have to do with the aliens? This has something to do with the aliens, right?
Yeah, because it was taken out, and the implant was it was modeled after the implants were found in American civilian abductees, or abducted by extraterrestrial aliens in flying saucers.
So you have Mercati beg Watson to get into a sealed shelter that he's built by saying that we're human is an illusion. That's a quote. That we're human is an illusion. What do you mean by that?
That we're human is an illusion. Professor Will Watson asked Mercati, says, well, in that case, what are we? And he says, well, we are of ashes and dust. We're not who we think we are.
Well, who do you think we are as the author?
Maybe of ashes and dust, yeah. I mean, we're spiritual beings, and maybe we don't even know it.
What do you mean by we're spiritual beings?
Good question. We're spiritual beings, and we're made in the image of God, but God might not be what we think he, she, or it is. And
are you implying that it might be aliens?
I'm implying in the book, or actually saying in the book, that we're actually half alien and half terrestrial ape, and we were as a genetic hybridization program, and we were formed about just over 200,000 years ago, and planted and put on this earth.
Obviously, or do you have some sort of actual evidence of this, or is it just fictionalized in your head?
Yeah, in between, Steve, because this is all, as I said, this has been covered up by the U.S. government dating back to probably that so-called Roswell crash, which actually didn't happen in Roswell. It happened in Corona, about 60 miles north of Roswell, back in Independence Day, 1947. And this has been covered up because Uncle Sam is looking at it from a weapons research development point of view. These crash flying saucers are trying to be reversed engineered to see if we can learn anything like that to improve our own military capabilities, unfortunately, to use against other human beings, other countries, and that we are so-called adversaries, like Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. What do you think humanity would do if we learned that there really are aliens? How do you think we would react to it?
I've been thinking about that a hell of a lot, because evidently this is going to be supposedly revealed. Like President Trump is going to come on supposedly this summer. You've heard about that, I think, saying that
It's been in various news sources. Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but whether it comes out to that remains to be seen. But you know what? I think originally it was said that in the MJ-12 documents that President Truman learned about this, and he set up a committee of 12 men, and which the chief of the committee was to report to him directly in case of more information about the UFO became public that the United States government could not cover up. So far, they've been able to do this fairly successfully, But I mean, if ever combat came to the point where aliens were actually uh, uh, came down to Earth and to like make themselves present, rather than hide, then there would be supposedly a draft notice that he was supposed to use on national television to say this, but it never came down to that point, So that's where we are today. So what would happen at that time, back in the late 40s, 1947 to be exact, America was still a Christian nation, and that would be too upsetting particularly for conservative Christians. To know that we're not alone in the universe, and maybe everything we've been told in the Bible isn't exactly the way it really happened, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But now I think, for better or for worse, I don't know what your religious preferences are, and it doesn't really matter to me. But we're not there anymore like that. America is largely if it's a Christian nation, it's more or less on a periphery like that. And I think that if this were made known to people, it would not be the big epiphany or revelation that it would have been back in the late 40s.
Do you think that the many entertainment products, whether they're movies, TV shows, books, etc., that have come out over the last 40 or 50 years about aliens, do you think that that has helped to prepare humans to deal with it?
Right, exactly. Now, you said it better than I could.
So as you were writing this book of Ashes and Dust, what came first for you, the plot or the characters?
The plot, I think. Pretty much they were like contemporaneous, or going on at the same time. But I think more or less the plot, and then the plot to a certain degree gave birth to the main characters, the three main characters there.
Did you outline the story?
No, I didn't. That's a good point. I'm not that methodical a writer. I outlined it, but not the way you're thinking right now.
You're doing it by the seat of your pants.
I'm outlining the book, for example, when I'm jogging on the beaches of Diego Garcia. I'm jogging on the beaches when I had a military assignment out there. Now, I'm teaching the U.S. military at Diego Garcia way back when, and I'll be jogging the beaches, and while I'm jogging the beaches of Diego Garcia in the beautiful Indian Ocean, the book is being written out inside my head.
And did you then go back to somewhere and mark a journal down?
Yeah. And I went back to my room and I wrote it back down longhand. Your listeners might find this interesting in me. I couldn't write anything in pen because why? Yeah. Why? Because when I wrote stuff in pen, I feel that was irreversible. I couldn't, change anything. But I did more erasing and worn down more erasers on top and tip of my pencil than I did anything else.
Did you then type up the book yourself or give it to a typist?
No, I typed it up. I mean, matter of fact, I typed it up originally, the manuscript, the old-fashioned way on a manual typewriter.
How long ago was this?
Quite a few years ago. But then, word processing came out, and those days are gone now, thank God.
Which, the manual typewriters?
Yeah, right.
If I started on a manual typewriter, if I had to go back to one, I'd stop writing.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Did you do a lot of research for this book?
Some research, yeah, I did in the libraries, but for the most part, this stuff that happened, the research was done inside my head by being exposed to these stories and reading about it down through the years. Snippets here, snippets there.
And how long did it take you to write the book overall?
Oh man, it took me many years, and I just cobbled the piece together. By the way, I did have ordinarily I don't get writer's block. If anything, not writer's block in the sense of writer's constipation. If anything, I got writer's diarrhea. I couldn't figure. I had the ending written out inside my head, and jotted down on paper, and then also it was like 90% book of the manuscript was done.
Are you a big rewriter? Did you do a lot of rewriting?
Not much except for the end because I couldn't get the final I couldn't get to the final bridge, the very end. And for a long time I struggled at that. And I don't know if I'd call myself a spiritual person. I mean, and it didn't actually ask God to help me out to give me the impetus, the afflatus, if you will, the spiritual inspiration to come up with the end. But then I struggled for I think maybe a few weeks, and then all of a sudden it came to me. And then I was able to jot a few things down on paper and then put the dots together, and the story was written and done. And it took me many years. Yeah.
Many years. And then once it came together, it all came together.
Yeah. Exactly. Once it came together at the, I'll tell you, I was at the Camp Humphreys, which is the United States military's largest overseas base. And it just happens to be here down the road from where I'm speaking right now. Came to me in the computer lab there. One day I was inside the computer lab and it just popped inside my head and boom, I was done.
That must have felt like a big epiphany, huh?
Yeah, right. I was really relieved.
What are the things that you think that a writer needs to do in order to secure a publisher?
Just have a thick skin, man. It's tough. I mean, it's easier for me to say. I mean, it's just like saying you get one rejection after another. I read Stephen King was rejected 38 times in a row in North American publishers, United States and Canada, under a pseudonym, And then finally the word got out what he was trying to do. See if he, I think it was Hearts in Atlantis was the name of the book. He wanted to see if he was not if he was, again, an unknown writer, if he could get published, years after he got his initial success with Carrie back in, I think, 1976.
Well, his pseudonym that he got published under was Richard Bachman.
Bachman, right. And then he got rejected 38 times in a row. And then finally, he found out.
Somebody figured it out.
Publishing world figured out what he was trying to do, and he got picked up. Yeah, that was one of his more critically acclaimed books, too, from what I'm told. I never read it, but that's what I'm told.
So talk to us about your poetry. How long have you been writing poetry?
Oh, yeah, okay. Poetry, I've been right here in this laptop. I had the poems for 12 and a half years hibernating in there. And, some of them been published and most of them had not been. A lot of it is haiku, which is Japanese condensed poetry, usually traditionally not rhyming poetry, but it zeroes in on a singular image, and it's in 5, 7, 5, 3 lines of 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and 5 syllables.
It's 17 syllables overall, yeah.
And it was just hibernating. I says, by God, I got to get this stuff out. I mean, it's just, I'm not getting any younger. I'm just going to get it out, and I'm going to get it published.
So is poetry a kind of calling for you? Does it just happen for you?
Yeah, because as an English professor, don't forget I was an English professor. I'm teaching this stuff for decades, and I decided, well, it's my time to show what I got, to the world, and there we are, and I got this stuff out, and it's going to come out in subtitle is an eclectic blend of poetry from the ethereal realm.
That's a lot of words there.
Yeah, right. On the front cover, right.
Did you go in your schooling? Did you train as a poet at all?
Yeah, no, I actually did when I was an undergraduate as an English major. But I'll tell you what, now I take a dim, and the listeners are going to be, hello, any listeners still out there? You're going to take a dim view of what I'm telling you. I don't think much of modern poetry. I really don't. I say in my foreword over there, most of it published today is gibberish.
Well, so who do you admire? Who do you read?
Well, I read kind of like Robert Frost, and that's very structured. You don't find that today in modern poetry. And if it doesn't rhyme, doesn't have to rhyme. That went out with the American Civil War. But there's no rhythm, rhyme, or harmony, and most poetry today doesn't make sense. I remember as a national member of the National Authors Guild, I once wrote a thread about this about a year ago, and one of the other women poets who is far more accomplished than I am. I don't know how many awards and she's won in poetry and books that she has in poetry. She made a reply on her thread saying, yeah, she agrees. She locks on, to most of the poetry that's published today out in these online journals, mostly electronic online journals. She says, I can't understand the stuff myself. I can't understand it. So
is it possible for you to define, at least from your perspective, what makes poetry poetry?
Yeah, it sounds, first of all, the rhythm, rhyme, and harmony, oversimplified somewhat, and it's something that's comprehensible.
Must it rhyme?
No, no, it doesn't. In fact, some of my that's in fact that's a no-no in today's modern poetry world. Some of my poetry does, but most of it does not. But I want something. I think the singular word to answer your question there, Steve, is comprehensibility. Can the average person say of a high school grad? Well, maybe not so much today. High school kids are graduating high school today. Can't even read and write. Maybe even sometimes in college. But can the average college graduate read the poem and understand it on the say after two takes?
Right. Well, it can be a little dense and sort of difficult to divine when you're reading a lot of poetry, and you have to kind of back up and do an analysis of it to understand it. Do you think that poetry must, by its nature, be truthful and honest?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got to be honest. Yeah, that which I think a lot of poets. I hate to say it, but a lot of poets are not. They're not honest about this, and the more obscure their poetry is, they think the better chance they got of being published.
Well, what one of the most important things that poets and writers do is to observe and listen and take in the world. How important do you think it's been in your life to be an observer of the world?
Yeah, yeah, very, very, very important. I'll tell you, one of the things I used to do in my English literature classes when I was teaching for the University of Maryland, I'd take them out and for 10 minutes, I just said, all I want you to do, I'm going to go outside, is look up in the sky and look around. I want you to make mental notes of what you see, you hear, you smell, if anything, touch and taste, 5 senses. I want you to really look around and see what you see. And I want you to be quiet. And you don't talk to each other for 10 minutes. And then we come back into the room and then we talk about, well, what did we observe? What did we sense? What did we feel? Not just maybe with our own 5 senses, but inside our being, inside our soul, and then write it down. And then that was a good, takeoff to further writing exercises.
And how did you get into acting? Let's talk about that for a moment.
Oh yeah, acting. Yeah, I was always big, and a good moviegoer when I was a kid in high school, and I got started in high school actually, and I was the one of the other two kids in the high school class, the high school the senior in our senior year, one of the two class actors, and I got started in that. I had a natural proclivity or penchant for that, if you would. Unlike, as I said, I wasn't a good student, but I was in dramatic arts. I got started in that, and then I went on to junior college because I couldn't get accepted in in a 4-year college. My grades just weren't good enough. And don't forget, in the late '60s, that college was still selective, unlike today, where any nincompoop who's got the money can get into college. It was just still selective. It's a whole different world today. And I got in junior college, and I got started in the junior college drama club, and then also the local community theater, and I got started in Summerstock and this is up in northwestern Connecticut. And if you're familiar with the Berkshires up there, you got a lot of what's called Summerstock theater plays that are made in the summertime for tourists coming in the Berkshires. And I got started in that as well. And of course, I didn't get paid for that, but we had the hell of after rehearsal parties, we had a hell of a good time in these actor rehearsal parties. That was a lot of fun.
Do you think that your having been an actor has helped you as a writer?
No, not really. Oh, by the way, I neglected to mention, and it's not in my biography, I've done a hell of a lot of Korean television over here in motion pictures. Not anymore because I'm getting too old for that, But I was in the most popular national television series way back when. I was a 1-star United States Forces Korea general, and I was in the first 7 episodes on national television. I ran for 60 episodes. Usually it's only 40. And I'd be walking down the street of Seoul, which is a bigger city than New York City, 10 million compared to 8.5 million compared to New York. And walking down the city of Seoul, and I'd be recognized on national television, as a national television actor. And but that didn't last too long because you know what?
You would also stand out a little bit.
Yeah. I mean,
you look a little bit culturally different than the average Korean.
Sure, people would, come. I remember the first time a Korean girl was asking me for my autograph and all. And by the way, that wears off fast. I can understand why real movie stars, not like me. By the way, when I said I was, in the movies, I had these small roles, cameo, but they're all speaking roles and cameo. But I was never, big time movie star. Paid well for what I did, but I was never any, Liam Neeson, whom I acted opposite of, and when he was portraying General Douglas MacArthur in Operation Chromite.
What was that experience like?
Oh, I tell you, working with him, locked up all day with him from 8 o'clock in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon was just inspirational. He's a hell of a decent guy. Maybe I shouldn't make a judgment based on just the short time that I was with him. But I mean, he's well educated, never went to college, my understanding, but was well educated, well informed, and he's very articulate.
But he treated you well.
Oh, no, and really, he says, yeah. Well, I says, hey, Liam, I tell you, makeup artist did a hell of a job on you. You look like General Douglas MacArthur. And he says, yeah. And he walks over to me, grabs my hand, and he puts it on his belly. I mean, he's got his pillow underneath his belly to show that MacArthur actually had a paunch, and he had some physical ailments at the time. He had a hell of a sense of humor, Liam Neeson. So I had a great time working with him. But I started this back in the mid '90s, so it's been like 30 years ago, and when I was here before in Korea. But now you got like 1,500 cable television channels, maybe a dozen of them are pornography and stuff like that, and you got these gangster rappers are now just playing rappers, and you got the Korean, K-pop artists and all. You got all these shows on television and radio. You're inundated. 2 months, I mean, 2 weeks after your face appears on the big silver screen, like a downtown movie theater in Seoul. 2 weeks later, you're all forgotten.
Well, that's true of pretty much
It's
everybody.
just inundated. Well, everybody's a celebrity. Everybody's going to get their 15 minutes of Andy Warhol fame.
So some of the most famous movie actors of all time, going back to the beginning of movies, nobody remembers them anymore. Just very, very few that stand out over long periods of time. That's just the way it works. That's been that way from the beginning of time. Well, I've been having the most fascinating conversation with Ron Roman, the author, Ron Roman, of Ashes and Dust is the novel that we've been talking about, among other things that Ron has done. And we're going to wind the show down a little bit. Ron, in all of your experiences, you've told us all these incredible stories. Do you have a story you can share with us beyond the ones you've already told us that's happened to you in the business of writing or in acting or whatever it is, that's either weird, quirky, offbeat, strange, or just plain funny?
Yeah, just plain funny. This is a few years back, a couple decades now. I remember when I was doing my graduate degree, third graduate degree at Wesleyan University in Connecticut, and I was finishing up on my thesis, and I would be using a floppy disk at the time because that's all we had. And I'll never forget. I didn't make a backup file, and I was working on my thesis, and I had a deadline and all stuff, and like an idiot, and my wife would always remind me that, hey, you need a backup file, get another floppy disk, and I never paid attention, and I paid the price. So I lost the damn thing, and when I think I found it was too damaged to be retrievable, the information, and I had to start the pretty much part of the thesis all over again. And boy, was that ever debilitating? What a debilitating experience that was. So I learned a lesson: always come prepared, and a good piece of advice I got for would-be writers is. Always come prepared. Hire a professional copy editor, or at least a proofreader, because nobody is that good. They don't make mistakes. I don't care if you're a Harvard University professor of English. Everybody makes mistakes because you see everybody else's mistakes, but you can't see that speck of dust in your own eye, as the Bible said.
Well, that is true. That is absolutely true.
Hire somebody, and always be open, have a thick skin. And one more thing, we don't have time to get on this, but I'm just going to put this as a teaser out there. I don't know to what degree AI now, artificial intelligence, is it going to impact us? Because we might only have 3-4 years left as writer. I remember I saw an interview, 20 minutes with David Baldacci, one of the most commercially successful writers in the world, and he said that, he's got a big lawsuit against these AI manufacturers now. They're stealing his books and they're putting out there, by essentially the what AI technology. And he says we might have only 3-4 years left as writers.
It's scary. It's more apocalyptic stuff.
Well, apocalyptic stuff, yeah, right. I mean, I think, and speaking as a history, I mean, an English professor, I remember reading somewhere that my research when I was a student said that this novel by the name of Pamela was the first English language novel to be is generally considered history's first English novel, 1608, and might all be coming to an end now, Steve, in the next 3-4 years.
It might be. Sadly, it is true, but I hope that humans will continue to create in their own way. I hope so.
I hope so too.
So, Ron Roman, this has been a very fascinating and fun hour on StoryBeat, and I thank you very much for your time, your energy, and your wisdom today.
I really enjoyed being on here, Steve, and I appreciate it. And to the listeners, go out there, buy the book.
Thanks very much, Ron. You take care.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.